In the beginning, humanity did not separate sound from the sacred. Long before music became entertainment or background noise, sound was understood as a living force, something capable of shaping emotion, altering consciousness, and connecting the human world with unseen realities. Across continents and civilizations that never met, ancient peoples shared a strikingly similar belief. Vibration was the language of creation itself. The world was not silent at its birth. It was sung into existence. For early societies, sound carried intention and power. A drumbeat was never just rhythm, and a chant was never merely a melody. Each tone was believed to move through both body and spirit, awakening invisible energies that bound communities to ancestors, nature, and the cosmos. In many African traditions, ceremonial drums were treated as sacred beings rather than instruments. Their rhythms were thought to call ancestral spirits, guiding healing ceremonies and restoring harmony when illness or misfortune disturbed the balance of life. The sound did not simply accompany ritual. It was the ritual, acting as a bridge between worlds. Similar beliefs emerged thousands of miles away in the high monasteries of Tibet, where monks used singing bowls and deep harmonic chants to create resonant sound fields that seemed to suspend time itself. The vibrations were said to cleanse the mind and align inner energies, allowing practitioners to enter profound states of meditation. Listeners often described feeling the sound not only in their ears but throughout their entire bodies, as if every cell responded to the gentle waves of resonance. The experience suggested that sound was not external but deeply internal, something that awakened what already existed within. In ancient India, sacred texts described the universe as originating from a primordial sound, often symbolized by the syllable om. This vibration was believed to contain the essence of all existence, a cosmic frequency underlying reality itself. Chanting was therefore an act of alignment, a way of tuning the human body to the rhythm of the universe. The repetition of mantras was not meant for performance, but for transformation, gradually reshaping the mind through sustained vibration and breath. Indigenous cultures across the Americas and Australia also preserve traditions in which song lines, healing chants, and ceremonial music mapped spiritual landscapes. Songs were memory, navigation, and medicine all at once. Shamans used repetitive rhythms and vocal tones to enter trance states, guiding both themselves and participants in an altered awareness where emotional wounds could be confronted and released. These practices reveal a shared intuition. Sound could change perception, and changing perception could change reality. What is remarkable is that these civilizations, separated by oceans and centuries, arrived at nearly identical conclusions. They recognized that human beings are vibrational creatures living in a vibrational world. The heartbeat creates rhythm before a child is even born. Breath produces sound before language forms. Listening, in ancient understanding, was an active spiritual practice rather than passive consumption. Silence itself was sacred because it allowed sound to emerge with meaning. Modern life, however, has transformed our relationship with sound. Today, music often fills empty spaces, played through headphones during commutes, layered beneath conversations, or streamed endlessly as background atmosphere. We listen constantly, yet rarely with intention. Sound has become abundant, but less meaningful, stripped of ritual context and spiritual purpose. The ancient listener approached sound with reverence, preparing the body and mind to receive it. In contrast, modern listeners are surrounded by noise, yet disconnected from resonance. This shift raises an intriguing possibility. If ancient cultures treated sound as a tool for healing and spiritual alignment, were they responding to something real, something experiential that modern society has overlooked? Perhaps sacred soundscapes were not mystical exaggerations, but carefully developed practices based on deep observation of how vibration affects human consciousness. The chants, drums, and tones passed down through generations may have encoded knowledge that was never written but felt, practiced, and embodied. As we begin exploring the forgotten musical frequencies used for deep spiritual healing, we return to a question that echoes across history. What if sound is more than something we hear? What if it is something that shapes who we are? To understand this possibility, we must first rediscover how ancient people listened, not with distraction, but with presence, believing that within vibration lay the power to heal, transform, and reconnect humanity with the sacred rhythm of existence itself. While ancient traditions describe sound in spiritual language, modern science has begun to reveal that many of their intuitions may have been rooted in observable biological realities. At its most fundamental level, sound is vibration traveling through a medium, measured in frequencies that interact directly with matter, including the human body. Every sound we hear is a pattern of pressure waves moving through air, yet once those waves reach us, they do far more than stimulate the ears. They influence the brain, the nervous system, and even the rhythms that regulate our internal organs. The human body itself is an intricate system of vibrations. The heart beats in rhythmic pulses, brain activity moves in electrical oscillations, and cells communicate through subtle electromagnetic signals. Because of this, the body naturally responds to external frequencies through a phenomenon known as resonance. When an external vibration matches or harmonizes with an internal rhythm, the body can begin to synchronize with it. This principle helps explain why certain sounds feel calming while others create tension or anxiety. A slow, steady rhythm can encourage breathing to slow, heart rate to stabilize, and muscles to relax, while chaotic or unpredictable noise can trigger alertness and stress responses. Neuroscience has shown that sound can influence brainwave activity through a process often called brainwave entrainment. The brain operates across several frequency ranges, from fast beta waves associated with alert thinking to slower alpha and theta waves linked with relaxation, meditation, and creativity. Repetitive rhythms or tonal patterns can gently guide the brain toward these slower states, which are often associated with emotional healing and deep introspection. This may explain why chanting, drumming, or listening to sustained tones can produce feelings of peace or altered awareness without the use of external substances. The brain, in a sense, begins to tune itself to the rhythm it perceives. Research in music therapy further demonstrates how sound affects emotional regulation. Studies have shown that carefully structured music can reduce cortisol, the hormone associated with stress, while increasing dopamine and oxytocin, chemicals linked to pleasure and social bonding. Patients exposed to calming sound environments often experience reduced anxiety, improved sleep, and enhanced recovery from trauma or illness. Even simple vocalization, humming or chanting, stimulates the vagus nerve, a critical pathway connecting the brain to the heart and digestive system. Activation of this nerve encourages a state known as parasympathetic dominance, where the body shifts away from fight or flight responses into rest, repair, and healing. The physical experience of sound extends beyond hearing alone. Low-frequency vibrations can be felt through the skin and bones, explaining why drums or deep tones seem to resonate within the chest or abdomen. This tactile dimension of sound may be one reason ancient healing rituals relied heavily on percussion and sustained drones. Participants were not only listening, they were immersed in vibration, allowing sound to engage multiple sensory pathways simultaneously. Modern acoustic research suggests that such full-body resonance can influence mood and perception more powerfully than auditory stimulation alone. Rhythm also plays a profound role in coordinating human physiology. When individuals listen to steady beats, their breathing patterns and heart rhythms often begin to synchronize unconsciously. This synchronization can create a sense of safety and unity, particularly in group settings. Scientists studying collective music experiences have observed that people singing or drumming together often display aligned heart rate patterns, suggesting that shared sound can literally bring bodies into harmony with one another. What ancient communities described as spiritual unity may partly reflect measurable physiological coherence. Importantly, science does not claim that specific frequencies possess mystical powers on their own. Yet it increasingly acknowledges that sound profoundly shapes mental states and bodily processes. The meaning attached to sound, cultural, emotional, and intentional, also amplifies its effects. A chant believed to be sacred may deepen focus because expectation and belief influence perception, activating psychological pathways that enhance relaxation and openness. In this way, subjective experience and biological response work together rather than opposing each other. The emerging dialogue between science and ancient wisdom reveals an unexpected convergence. Where spiritual traditions spoke of energy alignment, modern researchers describe nervous system regulation. Where elders described harmony between body and cosmos, neuroscience observes synchronization between external rhythms and internal brainwaves. Different languages are being used to describe what may be the same underlying phenomenon. Human consciousness is highly responsive to vibration. Understanding this scientific foundation changes how we interpret ancient sound practices. The chants, drums, and tonal rituals preserved across cultures may not have been arbitrary expressions of faith, but refined methods developed through centuries of observation and experience. Without measuring instruments, early practitioners learned through sensation what modern laboratories are only beginning to quantify: that sound has the capacity to guide attention, regulate emotion, and open pathways to deep psychological healing. As we continue exploring sacred soundscapes, the boundary between mysticism and science grows less rigid, suggesting that forgotten musical frequencies may represent not superstition, but an early science of a human mind expressed through sound. Across ancient cultures, sacred sound was never random. Specific tones, rhythms, and musical structures were preserved with remarkable care, passed orally from one generation to the next as tools for transformation rather than artistic expression. These sound traditions were often guarded within temples, healing circles, or initiatory rites because they were believed to influence consciousness in precise and powerful ways. To those who practiced them, certain frequencies were not simply pleasing to the ear. They were gateways into altered states where healing, insight, and spiritual communication became possible. One of the most widespread elements of sacred sound was the sustained tone, often produced through chanting or droning instruments. In monasteries across Asia, monks developed vocal techniques that emphasized deep, resonant frequencies capable of producing multiple harmonics at once. These layered vibrations created an immersive sonic environment in which listeners reported sensations of expansion, timelessness, or inner stillness. The purpose was not musical complexity, but stability. A continuous tone provided an anchor for attention, allowing the restless mind to settle into rhythmic awareness. Over time, practitioners believed the sound aligned internal energies, dissolving emotional disturbances and restoring balance between body and spirit. In many ancient temples, architecture itself was designed to amplify particular frequencies. Stone chambers, domed ceilings, and enclosed sanctuaries enhanced resonance, causing chants or instruments to reverberate long after they were played. Archaeologists and acoustic researchers have found that some sacred spaces naturally emphasize low-frequency vibrations that can be physically felt throughout the body. Ritual participants standing within these structures experience sound as a surrounding presence rather than a directional source, reinforcing the belief that they had entered a sacred dimension. The environment and the music worked together, transforming sound into an enveloping field of vibration. Drumming traditions offer another example of intentional sonic design. Across Africa, the Americas, and parts of Asia, repetitive drum patterns were used to induce trance states during healing ceremonies. The rhythms were often steady and cyclical, gradually guiding participants into synchronized breathing and movement. As the tempo interacted with the nervous system, awareness shifted from analytical thinking toward embodied experience. Shamans and ritual leaders used these rhythmic journeys to access visions, communicate with ancestors, or diagnose spiritual imbalance. Modern observers sometimes describe these states as psychological dissociation. Yet within traditional frameworks, they represented heightened connection, a crossing point between ordinary perception and spiritual reality. Overtone singing, practiced in regions such as Mongolia and Tibet, demonstrates an even more refined understanding of resonance. Skilled vocalists could emphasize natural harmonics within their own voices, producing multiple pitches simultaneously. The resulting sound felt both human and otherworldly, as if one voice carried hidden layers beneath the audible tone. Listeners often described feeling vibrations moving through different parts of the body, suggesting an intuitive mapping between sound and physical sensation. These practices reflected the belief that harmony within sound mirrored harmony within the self by creating internal resonance. Practitioners sought emotional clarity and spiritual alignment. Equally important was the communal dimension of sacred sound. Many healing traditions relied on collective chanting or singing rather than individual performance. When groups repeated the same rhythm or melody, a shared resonance emerged, dissolving boundaries between participants. Voices blended, breathing synchronized, and individuals experienced a powerful sense of belonging. This collective vibration was believed to strengthen healing by aligning not only individual bodies, but the entire community. Illness was often understood as imbalance within relationships, between people, ancestors, or nature, and communal sound restored unity through shared rhythm. Unlike modern musical systems that prioritize written notation and fixed compositions, sacred sound traditions were primarily transmitted through memory and lived experience. Apprentices learned by listening, repeating, and feeling the effects within their own bodies. Slight variations were accepted because intention mattered more than technical perfection. The healer's presence, emotional focus, and spiritual preparation were considered essential components of the sound itself. In this way, the frequency was not merely a measurable pitch, but a combination of vibration, intention, and context. Over centuries, these practices formed complex sonic languages that encoded knowledge without written records. Songs carried myths, healing methods, and cosmological teachings embedded within rhythm and melody. The repetition ensured survival across generations, yet it also made these traditions vulnerable. When cultural transmission was interrupted, entire systems of sonic knowledge could vanish almost instantly. What remained were fragments, instruments preserved in museums, chants recorded without context, or rituals remembered only as folklore. Exploring these forgotten sacred frequencies reveals that ancient music was fundamentally experiential. It sought not applause, but transformation, not entertainment, but alignment. The sounds were carefully chosen to guide emotion, attention, and perception toward deeper awareness. Whether through chanting monks, trance-inducing drums, or harmonic vocal traditions, ancient cultures demonstrated a profound understanding of how vibration could shape inner reality. Their legacy suggests that healing once depended not on complex technology, but on the human ability to listen, resonate, and participate fully in the living soundscape surrounding them. Despite the deep importance sacred sound once held across civilizations, many of these healing traditions gradually faded from collective memory, not because they ceased to work, but because the cultural environments that sustained them were profoundly transformed. The disappearance of sacred soundscapes was not a single event, but a slow historical process shaped by conquest, religious change, technological development, and shifting human priorities. As societies evolved, sound itself was redefined, moving from a sacred medium of transformation to a commodity of entertainment. One of the most significant disruptions came through colonization and cultural suppression, when expanding empires encountered indigenous societies. Ritual music and ceremonial sound practices were often misunderstood or deliberately discouraged. Missionaries and colonial authorities frequently viewed trance drumming, chanting, or spirit-invoking songs as superstition or threat, associating them with paganism or disorder. Sacred instruments were confiscated, ceremonies banned, and oral traditions interrupted, because many healing sound practices depended entirely on transmission through living communities rather than written texts. Even a single generation of suppression could erase centuries of accumulated knowledge. What had once been central to communal well-being was reduced to folklore, stripped of its original meaning. Religious reforms within established civilizations also reshaped humanity's relationship with sound, as spiritual institutions sought greater structure and doctrinal control. Spontaneous or ecstatic musical expressions were sometimes replaced by standardized liturgical forms. Sound became regulated, confined to approved melodies and controlled environments. While sacred music remained present, its function shifted toward worship and moral instruction rather than direct experiential transformation. The participatory, trance-inducing elements that once allowed individuals to enter altered states were gradually minimized, creating a distance between listener and spiritual experience. The rise of industrialization introduced another profound change. Urban environments filled with mechanical noise alter humanity's acoustic landscape for the first time in history. Factories, engines, and crowded cities produced constant background sound that competed with natural rhythms of wind, water, and human voice. Silence, once a necessary foundation for meaningful listening, became increasingly rare. Music adapted to this new world by becoming louder, faster, and more stimulating, designed to capture attention amid distraction rather than guide introspection. The human ear adjusted to stimulation, while subtle vibrations central to ancient healing traditions became harder to perceive. A particularly influential shift occurred with the standardization of musical tuning systems. Modern Western music adopted fixed-pitch standards to allow instruments to play together consistently across regions and industries. While this innovation enabled global musical collaboration, it also narrowed the diversity of tonal systems that once existed worldwide. Many traditional scales and tuning methods, developed to emphasize resonance with voice or environment, were gradually abandoned. The focus moved toward harmonic convenience and mass production rather than experiential resonance. Sound became mathematically uniform, but perhaps less connected to the organic variability that ancient cultures explored intuitively. Technology further accelerated the transformation. Recorded music allowed sound to be reproduced endlessly without the presence of performers or ritual context. While this democratized access to music, it also separated sound from intention and environment. A chant heard through headphones no longer carried the communal energy, sacred space, or shared breathing that originally gave it meaning. Listening became passive consumption rather than active participation. Music accompanied daily life, but rarely demanded full attention or reverence. At the same time, modern society increasingly prioritized visual information over auditory awareness. Screens captured attention, and silence became uncomfortable rather than sacred. The constant stream of notifications, advertisements, and digital media filled the sensory field, leaving little space for deep listening. Ancient practitioners believed healing required immersion in vibration and presence, yet modern habits encourage fragmentation of attention. Sound remained everywhere, but meaningful listening slowly disappeared. Perhaps the greatest loss was not specific frequencies or instruments, but a worldview. Ancient cultures understood healing as harmony, alignment between individual, community, nature, and spirit. Sound functioned as a tool for restoring that harmony because it could be felt collectively and immediately. Modern perspectives, shaped by scientific specialization and individualism, separated physical health from emotional and spiritual experience. As a result, practices that addressed the whole human being were often dismissed because they did not fit neatly into measurable categories. Yet traces of these traditions never fully vanished. Fragments survived in ceremonial music, folk practices, and spiritual communities that quietly preserved ancestral knowledge despite external pressures. The persistence of these remnants suggests that sacred sound answered a fundamental human need, one that technological progress alone could not replace. The forgetting of healing soundscapes, therefore, may not represent their failure, but humanity's shifting attention away from forms of knowledge that required patience, embodiment, and communal participation. Understanding why these traditions were lost reveals something essential about the modern condition. The disappearance of sacred sound was not merely cultural erosion. It reflected a broader disconnection from rhythm, silence, and presence. In a world saturated with noise, yet hungry for meaning, the forgotten frequencies of the past begin to appear less like relics of superstition and more like unfinished conversations, echoes waiting to be heard again by a society ready to rediscover how deeply sound can shape the human experience. In recent years, a quiet rediscovery has begun to unfold across the modern world as stress, anxiety, and emotional exhaustion become increasingly common features of contemporary life. Many people are turning back toward practices that emphasize presence, embodiment, and inner balance. Among these renewed explorations, sacred sound has reemerged not as an ancient curiosity, but as a living method of healing. What was once dismissed as mystical or symbolic is now being revisited through both personal experience and scientific curiosity, suggesting that humanity may be remembering something it never truly lost. Sound healing gatherings, meditation concerts, and immersive sound baths have appeared in cities far removed from the temples and villages where sacred sound traditions first developed. Participants lie quietly while resonant instruments, singing bowls, gongs, chimes, and deep tone drums create waves of vibration that move through the space. Many describe sensations similar to those recorded in ancient rituals: slowed breathing, emotional release, vivid inner imagery, or profound calm. While modern settings differ from traditional ceremonies, the underlying principle remains familiar: sound used intentionally to guide awareness inward and restore balance. At the same time, technology has begun to play an unexpected role in reconnecting people with ancient sonic wisdom. Digital platforms allow recordings of chants, overtoned singing, and indigenous musical traditions to reach global audiences. Researchers experiment with therapeutic frequencies designed to support relaxation or focus, while meditation applications incorporate rhythmic soundscapes inspired by traditional practices. Although technology once contributed to the separation of sound from ritual context, it now also offers a pathway for rediscovery, enabling individuals to explore intentional listening regardless of location. Yet the true revival of sacred sound does not depend solely on instruments or specialized environments. It begins with rediscovering the human voice, the oldest healing instrument humanity possesses. Simple acts such as humming, chanting, or singing slowly and consciously can create vibrations felt throughout the chest and skull, stimulating relaxation and grounding attention in the present moment. Breath and sound naturally intertwine. When people vocalize with awareness, breathing deepens, thoughts slow, and the body shifts toward calm regulation. Ancient traditions understood this intuitively, teaching that healing often starts not by adding something new, but by returning to what is already within us. Equally important, is the practice of intentional listening. Modern culture encourages constant exposure to sound without awareness. Yet sacred traditions emphasized listening as an active state of consciousness. To listen deeply is to notice texture, rhythm, silence, and resonance, not only in music but in wind, water, footsteps, or one's own heartbeat. When listening becomes attentive rather than distracted, sound transforms from background noise into an experience that anchors awareness. In this sense, sacred soundscapes are not limited to rituals. They exist wherever listening becomes mindful and receptive. The renewed interest in sound healing also reflects a broader shift toward integrating ancient wisdom with modern understanding. Scientists continue to investigate how vibration influences the nervous system, while spiritual practitioners emphasize intention and meaning. Rather than opposing each other, these perspectives increasingly converge, suggesting that healing arises from both measurable physiological responses and subjective human experience. The future of sacred sound may lie in this collaboration, where technology refines access, science offers explanation, and tradition preserves depth and purpose. Rediscovering sacred soundscapes ultimately invites a change in perspective. Instead of asking which specific frequency holds magical power, the deeper question becomes how humans relate to vibration itself. Healing may not reside in a single tone, but in the relationship between sound, attention, and presence. Ancient cultures approached sound with reverence because it reminded them of interconnectedness between body and mind, individual and community, humanity and the wider universe. As we stand in an age filled with unprecedented noise, yet profound longing for stillness, the forgotten frequencies of the past offer a gentle invitation rather than a prescription. They encourage us to slow down, to listen intentionally, and to recognize that sound is not merely something passing through our ears, but something capable of reshaping perception and emotion. Perhaps the greatest lesson sacred soundscapes offer is that healing does not always require new inventions. Sometimes it begins with remembering how to listen to vibration, to silence, and to the subtle rhythms that have accompanied human life since the very beginning. In learning to listen again, we may rediscover not only ancient music, but a deeper harmony within ourselves.